us. Welcome to the Cycle 25 webcast via Skype, or not Skype, my gosh, via Zoom. Every week here Saturday mornings, 11:30 Eastern, and then captured out to our friends on YouTube. And we are so lucky today because we have the famous and infamous Mike Walker of remote ham station fame and of our friends. Well, Mike, introduce your station. I think that's a great place to kick off. Let's talk about you and about your station.
Well, thanks, Rod. And so Rod and I hashed this around what we're going to do, and I decided I wasn't going to be a death by PowerPoint. It was going to be, it's turned into more of a live tour from the station into actually how I operate it, is how we advertised it. So fortunately today I have a remote station at our cottage. And it started back about 2005 when I realized that the noise in the urban world meant I couldn't hear anything on 40. So through the summer when I was here, it was no problem. But so we'll do a quick tour of the antennas. Feel free to ask questions. This started out as one wire at a time. A lot of things were experiments. A lot of things were, let me just put it up and see if it works. And it still works the same way I put it up. And I never really, made it more formal or better. But, that's the nature of the hobby, right? Try it. If it works, great. If it doesn't work, move on. We're actually standing here at the base of the 160 80-meter vertical, and we will flip the camera, and I will try to walk cautiously and smoothly. But this is, this is just an onion here, and I got wires going up into trees. I got big trees, and I use either drones or air cannons to drop them in there. I actually did a whole drone video on QSO today, and you're going, geez, why has he got stuff like this stuck in here? And why is it so loose? Well, trees swing, so this goes up and down. This is the 160 wire. It's a common feed 160 80 CW vertical. And what happens is, as the ground freezes and doesn't freeze, because we're in the Great White North, I have to take this 4 feet out, as I probably about now, to bring the resonance back down. So it's just a quick and dirty way. Yeah, I could do it with relays and whatever, but this just works. It's incredibly reliable. And I've got them posted this way so the water doesn't run into them. So you see that works well because it's actually upside down at that point, but you get the idea. And because I'm fortunate enough to have some space in trees, and I just run these are elevated radials. One's 160, one's 80. They go for a long way. They should be shortened up, or it needs more. But all this sort of wire pattern here is my 40. And I did it in white so you guys could see it. But it's a 2-element 40 Cushman design phased array to the northeast or southwest. Sorry, John, that doesn't favor South America, and I can hear the difference. Under the pale, there's just a little switching box with some phasing lines. Again, nothing special. These are all built with, not a lot of money, well, except for the tree. But there's no connector here. I tend to use stainless steel quarter 20s and solder them on. And so this is the radial part, and this is part, and I like chokes. I use a lot of chokes. I should probably have more there. And it goes up into the trees. So that's that. We walk over to the tower here, and Rod, tell me if I need to turn into more of a Steadicam operator.
No, it's not bad. It's just a little jumpy, but it's quite tolerable.
Okay, so, and feel free to ask questions while I'm walking. This is what I started with a long time ago, was an HF6V. And it was great. I had a TS480. It got me on the air with Skype and Ham Radio Deluxe in its client server mode. Ultimately, that became a TS480 and remote rig. Not a bad antenna. Sucks on 80 though. Especially if you want to rag chew with your buddies here in Ontario. You're down about 20 dB. And,
so Mike, tell us a little bit about exactly where you are.
I am west of that famous town called Bob Cajun that's in the hip song. Bob Cajun is northwest of Peterborough, Ontario, and it's about an hour and a half drive to the north edge of Toronto here. So nothing, is that good enough, Rod? Is that what you had in mind?
Yeah, no, that's good. That's perfect.
Okay, we got a stepper up there. And you can, I don't know if you can see over here, the 40-meter, another 40-meter antenna, the 40-meter dipole is off there. That's for my North America coverage. And then I have a little control box over here. again, I can be pretty cheap at times. There's AC power here, and in this control box, and the reason it's a mess, by the way, it's just styrofoam to keep it warm during the winter. There's a regular transformer in there, it generates enough heat. Put that in there, it stays nice and toasty. For the winter, for the summer, I'm done. This is going to come out, and that rotor is going to be replaced with a Alpha Spid, and that's why there's a LAN cable here for the Rotor Genius, which will go here to control that. There are so many ways to do this less expensively, I guess, but most rotor controllers today, you can add RS-232 for long distance communications, or you can, to go one step further, and I'm not trying to confuse everybody, I could put a serial port on the end of this LAN cable or put a switch here if I had to. And I got this thing at Canadian Tire, and I just bolted it to a branch here, and I put this in there so that it doesn't fly open. And once I leave, I actually put a strap through it just so it doesn't fly open. It's been here 15 years. Nobody's ever touched it. So we'll hump out through the woods to where the equipment is. And any questions so far, which we can do that while we're
I've got a question I'd like to ask.
Doing the Rick Mercer rant.
I've got a question I'd like to ask, Paul. When your verticals, your wire verticals, obviously, I presume you're feeding them with coax, are you?
Correct.
The wire verticals. You're feeding
yes,
them with
correct.
coax?
They're being fed with coax.
Yeah. How do you feed them with coax? I know it's a daft question, but in other words, how do you keep the water out, basically? What do you use as a connecting medium at the bottom?
I've got
to your radials.
So on the 40 radials, they're just pigtails with PL259 soldered about 3-inch below, and then I actually cover them with a 3M goop. Comes in a red can, right. And then I tape it up well. That's about the best thing. And then the 11680 has actually got a SO239 on the bottom of its onion. And I'm trying to think if I got my 3M stuff must be at home, so I don't want it to freeze. So this is where all the radios are. So we will. So then it's your question.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
So you're in the boathouse now, right?
I am in the boathouse. Not going off. Just saying somebody walked into the boathouse. It's like, so we've just switched cameras again. I have again. This is what I have. This has taken me 15 years to do. But if you're thinking of doing remote, you just want to make sure that the radio works and that it turns on when you want and turns off when you want while I'm 100 miles away or about remote. All my teachings on remote operating also include having a PC, a Windows PC local to the radio. Now I'm using all Flex stuff. It's just gotten so much easier with the Flex stuff. Did that long before I started working with Flex. It was the fact I did this, I think, that I got to work for Flex because of my expertise and what they had done with remote equipment, with LAN-based communications. And as we get away from RS-232, which is half-century-old technology, the LAN stuff makes it more viable to have multiple things share information from the radio. Because if you think about what we want to track as our station gets more complicated, we need to know, we want the antennas on the right band. Maybe we've got bandpass filters. Maybe we want, I don't know, relays to switch if we go from high 80 meters to lower, from 75 to 80, et cetera. So I use a lot of relay boards here. You can get the whole detailed tour on this box on my QRZ page as your homework. Victor Alpha 3 Mike Whiskey. I walk through all the video stuff, highlighting it. I've got an amplifier. I've got a remote rig here. It's actually for work testing when I have to test stuff for, like, I'm local. So it's just plugged into my audio ports on the radio. It's like a long mic cord back to the house in the city. 6600, I chose that because, well, for me, it was a great deal. 6300 is a great remote radio. TS480s, not as good a receiver, but still a very good remote radio. And we're seeing more in that finally starting to come out. My PC, this is actually Flex's PGXL, and it violates everything on cooling. And I've never had an issue, and it's never gotten above any alarms or anything, because we're actually asking for 12 inches in all directions. But I've got a bunch of fans, 3 unique fan systems. One blows in, one blows out. These 2 are controlled by this little, eBay fan controller for like $10 and speeds up and slows down. And this is what makes it fun. You get all these little bits you can find on eBay for $10 that do so many other things. I have anybody make beer? They have these beer controllers like this to keep your heaters for your beer. Someone pointed it out to me, and it controls one of these 2 fans up here. That's the second fan system. That's actually this big AC fan here, which I found at a flea market for $15 and haggled the guy down to 10, and it moves a lot of air out of this box through the top. And then a third system that's run by my Node-RED software, which is a tool that hams are now starting to play with to do station integration. I know it looks like a lot. It's actually pretty simple. And I put the radio in this way so I could get to the connectors.
Yeah. Are you able to query the temperature remotely? So you can see where the rack is? So that must be quite a variance between the winter and the summer in that particular shed.
Right, absolutely. And right here is one temperature probe, sits right here on top. And then there's another one, I don't know, it's up here somewhere. I forgot where I stuck it. Because I can often see a 10 degree difference from here to here. And just to know what's going on outside, we have another probe right here. It's all, Raspberry Pi I2C, hex address 4A, that tells us what the temperature is in the boathouse. So, and Mike, then when I'm done, yeah, go ahead, Pat.
Mike, this is Pat. What's your typical up and download speed there at the shack?
Good question. So if in a remote, we're worried about upload and upload latency. Minimum, I can get it well south of 500 kilobits. About 300 is pretty normal by reducing the waterfall and pan adapter updates. Max, about 1.6 meg. Thanks. Find I don't need that real high detail on the pan adapter and the waterfall. Even if that's updated twice a second instead of 30 frames a second, that's loads. And if you're, and by the way, the box is a mess. We're now coming into spring. It's usually a lot neater. When we, through the winter, I'm often up here in a hurry if I have to change something. So, it's just patch it in and leave because it's really cold. And if you're a fan of Lightning, did I lose you? There you go. If you're a fan of lightningmaps.org, this is a lightning map.org receiver. And we should go look at that because that's pretty cool. That's a VLF receiver. And then when we're done, we just close the door. And most of these get taped up for the winter, actually, because it's hard enough to keep it cold. There's no extra insulation. And then how do I do my antenna switching? This thing is worth every penny. A really good 2x8 antenna switch. They make them in 1x8s. There's a lot of them available as kits in different modes. This one's LAN-based again, not RS-232, but it will support LAN or RS-232 for antenna switching, all automatic. And then I've got switches. These are, I use AC switches, and then up there, that big box is right here, is actually a 220 switch to turn power right off to the amplifier totally, if I have to. But yes, it's a boathouse. That freezes in the winter.
And you've mentioned cycling the power on a regular basis, like on a clock basis, because of course, when things go wrong, they go really wrong. What kind of mechanism?
Right. On the, let's go back because that's a good question. So the worst thing that can happen to me is I lose my internet access. And I don't have, it's my single point of failure, so I have it labeled modem and this and that in case I have to send a neighbor over here. But there is a relay that will kill the power to the modem if the modem if you can't ping the outside world. So all of a sudden, say you're at home and you notice, geez, I can't get to Google. So you try a couple of times, I still can't get to Google. You'd go maybe power cycle your modem. Well, I have a Raspberry Pi. Its only job in life, it's this one way back here, is to ping the internet. It's got a little Python script on it. It's like 20 lines. And what it does is it will toggle digital IO. They're like $30 Canadian. And so it just toggles the power to that and it will plug right into the Pi. It works really well. I can't build it for $30. So you see, I have 3 of them here. And one does, one of them is used to turn the PC on and off. If I have to DC power cycle it, One of them, that big one up there with the red cord on it, turns the power supply off to the 70 amp Astron. And you don't need that big a power supply. It's just what I had. And it's linear. It's not a switching. And I choke everything because every little wall cube will emanate RF.
Fantastic.
Make sense?
Yeah, this is really good.
Okay, so
this
one more.
This is the walk portion of our show again. Through the greenery.
Yes, and for the lightningmaps.org people, this is what their receiving antennas look like. Okay, so yes, it's some hockey sticks and a receiving board that's wired into these two cross-phased loops. Nothing special to waterproof it. That's like a Canadian Tire case with some holes in the bottom. It's been here for 10 years. Never failed me. Some spiders in there. But you get the idea on that. So I love the lightningmaps.org stuff. I think it's really cool. And we'll now go look at the radio part. And I'll have to log in on that one, Rod. So
yeah, no problem.
Because I didn't do it before I left.
So just foreshadowing, what we're going to do now, we're going to walk back to the house and we're going to log in as if we were remote to the location.
Right. And even if I'm here, which I'm most of the summer now, thanks to COVID, I'm still remote to the radios because they're now 100 feet that way, 200 feet.
Any questions while we're moving along?
Mike, it's Pat again. Do you typically just run from a PC or do you use a Maestro as well or both at the same time for your setup there?
We will show you, Pat.
Okay, cool.
So here's my operating position. So to answer your question, it's actually yes. So yes, I use a Maestro a lot. I have headphones plugged into the back of the Maestro. I can plug a CW key into the Maestro. And if you're not familiar with the Flex stuff, that's okay. The beauty of this hardware is it's got all the bits on the back, the stuff we normally hook up to our station. So we generally hook up, external speaker, headphones, CW key, maybe a line in or a line out. And all of those are right here on the back of the Maestro. So, and it just connects to the radio over a LAN or internet connection. And this is where the hobby is really going. If I actually wanted to, you know what, what you see right here is also an SO2R station if I want to be, without adding anything, because all the bandpass filters are built into the radio. It's sorry to sound like a bit of a commercial, but it's reality. So there's bandpass filters in the radio, and there's actually bandpass filters in the amplifier. So I can run full SO2R. I could probably even sneak in some two-band SIQ. So SO2R, for those that aren't aware of it, is the ability to be running as an operator on, say, 40 meters where I'm calling CQ in a contest, and then simultaneously dialing around on 20 on a different antenna, listening to see if somebody is looking for me. Maybe I made a new multiplier. So, and you tend to dial around while your voice cuer is going CQ contest, CQ contest. So I don't know how many SO2R operators we have. Tony, I know are you doing any?
Not right now, no. My brain's frozen.
Your brain's frozen. I
Besides,
tend to do it.
I don't use a voice keyer.
Yeah, well, you don't use voice on CW. Type of thing. So let me find Rod's breakfast. So Rod, I'm going to come in as another user here.
Sounds good. Now, where do you want to route your audio from?
We're going to stay with this audio.
Sounds good, because it's really good now. It's it was a little shaky outside, but it's really good now that you're back.
Yeah, it was a little breezy walking over. So
Mike, as a casual operator, this SO2R, one thing that I like is I can tune to a CQ calling frequency and at the same time tune around the bands and just kind of switch back and forth to receivers depending on, or slices depending on where I want to go. And it really does up your QSO count, or enjoyment, I guess I should say, even as a casual user.
Correct. Yep. Anything else? I want to just mute things here so we don't.
Just in case.
Just in case. So I'm going to join with video. Rod's going to let me in.
And that's you.
And I'll mute that mic.
Well, Mike's doing that. Can you hear me, Rod?
Yes, I can.
Oh, okay. On my Flex, I've got one slice operating 6-meter WSJT all the time, just monitoring the band. And then I have another slice, and I'm just learning how to do this myself. I have another slice on HF where I'm tuning around, and it's just really cool. It's really cool. And also, I don't have multiple wires everywhere. It's one box. And I'm going to talk to Mike about redesigning my station down the road to be even simpler.
Sounds good. And it looks like Mike has joined.
There we go.
There.
Okay, hang on a sec. Well, you might have to mute me. Let me mute myself. I can. Okay, now if you let me, I will share this screen.
Go for it.
And share. Now you shouldn't have anything there, which is fine. So let's bring up. So what I do here is if I was just operating normally, and I happen to be running, like we were talking about earlier, 6-meter FT8 this morning, and I was calling CQ Europe, and I don't know if we can still see if the Italian that I started to hear fell off the grid or not, but FT8 looks like normal, and because we are LAN based with all these connections, I could pick parts of this and run it on different computers if that made sense to me. Sound hugely confusing? Yes. Is it? No. Just don't think about it like this, saying, hey, can I bring up WSJT over here and use it? And the answer is yes. And then can I have my logbook over there? Well, the answer is also yes. And so this is how I do it. This panel here, I'll blow up my Node Red panel, is we call it Dave W02X, and I call it the programming language for non-programmers. I think I can make it a bit bigger. There we go. And let me find the corner. And this allows me to control all my relays down here. So we can see if the case fan is on, that goes to green. The power to the radios. Flex users understand why these two push to talk buttons are here. Therefore, dynamically re-registering the radio should you change users or whatever. Bunch of switching. Here's Rod, here's the temperature. So the case temperature is 17. It's warmer on the amp tray, of course. Outside in the boathouse, I have two probes. It's 13 and 11. I just didn't know where to put the fourth one. So, yet.
Someday.
The watt meter is pretty cool. So what this is, I don't know if you noticed when we were over there, I was using an LP, Larry Phelps LP100A with two probes on it. Still, if you're going to buy a watt meter, I swear to God, this is the best watt meter. Any one of his series. It is the only one I've seen in an amateur grade that correctly measures peak envelope power all the time. And I quickly learned the minute I got it on one of my radios that I was actually overdriving the radio. Because watt meters aren't really smart. They'll give you wattage in whatever energy is going down the pipe, and that includes the harmonics. Right? It doesn't know you're right on this frequency. It knows you're on this hunk of coax, and that's what it measures. And always more is not always better. And I find that a hard lesson to teach at times. We can turn the beam, and we've got these hard-coded, generally either Europe, South America, VK land, middle of the US, Japan, and we can stop it. The nice thing about our Node Red stuff is it also integrates beautifully with N1MM. So if you're a N1MM operator and you bring up a VU2, all of a sudden you've been running Europe's, you can just do Control J or Alt J. The new beam heading comes up. I just hit it. It sends it to the rotor, and the beam turns. This is where you can go at some point in time as you start to build your station. And I'm doing a talk for IDXCC next week, and it's about this whole flow of how we started and how ugly it got because of it was a rite of passage when you could actually do the Vimeo or the Visio diagram with wires going everywhere. Well, we want to get away from that because each one of those are areas of RFI ingestion or failure points. And I did a diagram in the Flex world of a full SO2R station with a radio, an amplifier, a tuner, and a 2x8 switch. And it was a LAN cable to each and RF cables to each. And then, of course, your DC power cables and your microphone and headphone. And that was it. And you could set it up in half an hour. like first time. Second time you can do it in about 10 minutes. And so and the GUI for programming these are pretty black and white, saying and I can show you on the antenna switch if you want. Just, you know, I can design in English. Oh, by the way, to finish the Node-RED part, the beauty of the Node-RED stuff too is it's easy to learn. If you're a logical thinker, I can program hello world in about 20 languages, but that's as far as I can get. The Node-RED stuff, if I sent you my code, if I sent you my flow, you can follow visually easily the flow from sending it a beam heading and how we got it over to the rotor, which was like 2, you know, boxes. And the training online is great. Node-RED was designed for a machine-to-machine communication protocols in factories. Well, guess what we're doing? Same thing. And you can edit it on the fly. It runs on a Raspberry Pi beautifully. It's GUI driven. And like I said, the best part is I can, and this is happening on our Node-RED group. We've got about 500 members. It's easy to share. So, hey, I got a KPA 500. Does anybody have a flow that works they can share with me? Sure, I can share you my flow. And you may like it, but you may want to twig it a little bit to look a little differently, or something may be important. Easy to make that change. Sure, I could sort of do it in C or C sharp, but I guarantee I'm going to break it.
And I think for most hams, I think you're onto something. This is something, I would say it's fair to say this is still fairly new in terms of most hams understanding Node-RED, but man, is there potential there. Because we're used to integration. As hams, we're used to doing integrations. We're used to looking at components. So all this stuff is fairly natural, but not a lot of us have done really close to the metal coding. And you don't need to. That's the whole point. So put it on your list, because this is an amazing thing to learn.
Hey, Rod, I took go ahead.
Just a quick comment, just to add on to that. As someone who has done a lot of close to the metal coding, it's a lot of fun when you could use this and not have to do that. So I endorse the whole thing.
George sent me a control board a month ago, and was it about a day later? I said, here, try this. And at least we had all the buttons turning on and off.
Yeah, it was amazing.
I spent an hour on it. The other thing I've done, ICOM 9700, it's got one push to talk port for an amplifier. Well, that's pretty okay, but you need more on a VHF, UHF 1.2 gig radio if you're using an amplifier, because you have probably 3 different amplifiers if you're going to use them. And in Node-RED, I was able to write a flow to talk to the 9700. And then one, you know, when we go to 2 meters, one relay is active. We go to 440, another, you get the idea. And, but because I used, this is a little confusing, HamLib, because somebody said, use the HamLib drivers, which run on our Raspberry Pi. It made it instantly portable to any radio that can talk, that works on HamLib. And that's most of them. Type of thing. And George, good morning. Good to hear you. So this is the amplifier control. The PGXL, the Power Genius, has the ability to have all that in it. A lot of amplifiers today have the ability to at least have some Windows-based control panel. And this is now the reason why I have the PC local to the radio, is that I just have to remotely connect to the PC window, whether I use Teamviewer, AnyDesk, you know, VNC, Type VNC. I mean, there's 100 different ways, Google Desktop. I only have to keep one computer correctly configured for my ham station, not the one here and the one there. And if I grab my Mac and want to operate it, because that was what I went away and, you know, this is what I used to do on road trips, the Mac just traveled better. I would just remote desktop to my Windows PC and I'm on the air. Or if I wanted someone to share my station to, I don't have to tell them how to configure everything all over again and say, oh yeah, well, just install WSJT, install this VSP driver. Don't forget to look for the audio and do this and that. It's all done. Just log in. You already know how to use WSJT. I've already got it configured. So that's why I really strongly recommend the PC as part of the local radio station. Is for the supportability in the long term. And it, as well, if you ever have to do network maintenance, like you've got something funky going on with a radio port, I can just bring up a web browser and do what I would do like I was sitting there. So this, keeping my internet running is a priority. Keeping this PC running and rebooting at all costs is also a priority. But the good news is I don't have to reinvent anything to do that. there are a lot of IT guys worldwide that, that's their worst fear, is that they lose internet connectivity to their business or whatever, and actually have to get in the car and go someplace. So that's why we stress that. So if I want to run, if I just want to run a contest, I can just start N1MM. I can just move. Of course, I moved the icon the other day, but oh, I can't even see it. There it is. It's just like that. N1MM comes up. I'm ready for a contest. And I don't have to deal with internet latency. I only have to deal with screen rewrite latencies. So
it's a lot easier to. I was going to say it's a lot easier to move pixels than it is to move actual data. Go ahead, Tom.
Mike, yeah, I was wondering what you use for logging. I mean, I see in one. I mean,
good question. I use. So let me show you a couple other tricks here too. I'll close N1MM eventually. Here we go. You get the idea. Yeah, this is not about that. Yeah. Let me teach you about one little thing. You could do this on your Windows keyboard right now. I'm gonna do a window key in the bottom left and the tab key. And you'll see everything sort of shrunk down. And then I'll answer your question. This is Windows Virtual Desktop. And if you've never used it, it gives me the ability to have multiple windows virtually. And right here, you can see we're in desktop 1. I probably could rename that. And it's got all my logging, all my contesting stuff. But I also have desktop 2. And if I click to it, we now bring up my HRD. That's what, you're a good lead man on this. And so this is also on the same computer. And by doing a special 3-finger salute, I can actually easily flip back and forth between both windows if I wanted to. And I can have as many as these virtual desktops as I want. Really handy if you're on a laptop, you don't have your full setup. Even since I'm working at home all the time, this is how I have my computer at home set up. I use a virtual one for all my Windows or my home stuff. And then if I got to switch to the office mode, I just 3-finger salute and I go over to the office virtual desktop. This isn't really that new for anything. Windows is not promoted at all. It's been in the Mac world for a long time. I believe it's been in the Linux world forever. So you can look at that. So sort of answer your question on logging?
Yes, it did. In fact, I use HRD also.
Yeah.
Has its points and bad points, but I like it.
I spent a summer trying every logbook, and I bought most of them, and then I went back to HRD. And the beauty is with the ADIF files, it's easy just to pull your whole logbook in. Some of them were great. I didn't like the workflow. Some of them didn't have the award tracking that I really wanted, was because I really wanted to be able to say, how many grids do I have? I wanted to click a button. How many grids on 6 meters do I have worldwide? Or how many countries in 6? And some of them were a bit more complicated to do that. Some of them, the fonts were just so big, and that was actually the killer on one of it. I couldn't make it because I have really good vision. I can live with 8-point font, so that didn't work. But if you like whatever one you like, buy it, keep it, support the guy that writes it. And for contesting, I use N1MM, and of course, then I just import the ADIF file over after.
So, Mike, I've got a question.
Sure.
Oh, okay. I can never tell when I'm on.
You're on.
I'm on. My Flex is at the end of my Wi-Fi network, and also sort of at the end of my power network. Everything is in a room. If I was to remote the Flex to the room right underneath the main router, put it directly in there, I'm trying to eliminate it sitting in a noisy environment. So I'm trying to because you talked about noise, and I'm still looking at what I got and what I ain't got. If I was to put it in there and then I routed my audio through PC audio, am I going to look at latency delay, especially on CW?
Yeah, I'll fess up. So there is, you will a little bit. Anytime you have to think of the audio path and how it gets from the radio to the your ears. And if you're using a Maestro, and this is Flex only related, but pay attention if you're thinking of doing it on any other device. Anytime right now, in today's world, anytime it runs through a Windows device to get to you, so that could be a Windows PC, or a Maestro, which is a Windows tablet. It's delayed by about 230 milliseconds average. It's not our application. It's actually the Windows audio processing. It's now maybe we can get better by going to smaller buffers, but you got to wait for 5 substations worth of buffers to fill. So the bucket's got to fill, then the CPU goes, oh yeah, I got to deal with this, and then it throws it off to the next guy like a conveyor belt. I think we could go to small. I'm guessing, by the way. I'm not saying anything that just my own assumption. We haven't done any testing. You can go to smaller packets. Buckets fill faster, but then it's subject to more corruption. So there's a trade-off issue, as we all know. If you happen to use Smart SDR for Mac or Dog Park SDR, your latency is much improved, as the Mac world handles the audio much faster as it being a real-time processing system as opposed to the Windows world, which is preemptive processing. Now, we don't really notice it because it's so friggin' fast, but at this layer, it starts to be noticeable. And if you want to follow the world of audio latency by over 100 milliseconds, follow the gamer world. These guys hate getting killed.
Yeah. Well, when Kojigo first came in on cable, I was a gamer back then, 10 years ago, and I could recompose myself after being shot before the other guy could get his gun up. And I'd get really nasty comments. Like I'd be dead. I would suddenly appear again in front of him going, bang. And he'd go, you're on a cable. And I went, yes, I am.
Yeah.
Okay. So if I was to, last question then, if I was to use the MacBook Air, let's just say it had enough processing power. I think it does. I've got Dog Park running it. And put that on the station, remoted the Flex to the other room. I might not have so.
You probably, Peter, you probably wouldn't even notice it. I know your operating style. I doubt it would even impact you at all, because from your operating style, being the first bit in a pileup is not going to, you're not that guy, right? So in fact, the latency might help you by being just that much later. And
I can also anticipate the fact he's going to turn it over, and on the old days with the Flex 3000, I would start transmitting while he was still talking, or sending, knowing that he'd get it when he finished. Anyway, okay, right. that gives me some things to think about, Mike. I appreciate it.
Yeah, in the latency world, you brought up another good question. I'm glad you did. There's two things in a contest perspective that, having been on the end of a pileup, I don't always call back the first guy I hear. Mm-hmm. I call back the first call sign I copy. Yeah. And if you've been in a big pileup, he'll guy go QRZ, and then there's big, and then I go VA3MW. And you're in, right? And I'm sure we've all been through that. John, I know down in your neck of the world, that probably happens to you daily, and type of thing. And a question about one thing I wanted to bring up about Wi-Fi. I honestly think Wi-Fi is fundamentally broken for streaming. It was really never designed for the load that we put on it. And I'll say this again, and you've heard me say it before. You can hear me say it again. Wi-Fi has to deal with radio signals. And it doesn't end at your border, right? It doesn't matter how close you are to the access point or the repeater. If your access point hears other people, and if you remember the old packet radio days, there's a whole bunch of algorithms in there that delay before retransmit. Let's give this guy a chance. Let's be a good neighbor. So if you can get anything streaming off Wi-Fi and let it breathe, that's great. And of course, in the amateur radio world, we can't deal with 200 or 300 milliseconds audio latency or 5 seconds. Watching Netflix, we don't even know or care. And it's a great, I do a lot of house type Wi-Fi for people. All I'll do is connect the Flex on my phone and hear the white noise, and I can start to hear dropout on people's Wi-Fi and know that it's really breaking up, I guess. Packet loss. Rod, over to you.
Very good. Hey, do you want to just show us what making a contact actually looks like in this interface and how it's it's pretty much the same, but just to kind of reassure people.
It is pretty much the same. So I'm on 50.313. I don't know if you guys can see me at the same time as my screen, but but that's okay. I don't know if you can switch back. But it is exactly the same, and then we'll see what happens. We'll call CQ. So I'm actually using, in my case, I am using the Maestro as my VFO, my user interface. I could have Smart SDR running on this laptop. I could have Smart SDR running on a different laptop. And again, a bit more of a flex commercial. If I don't use a Maestro, we have these great knobs that give me a really nice, this is the thing I missed first when we went to these computer interfaces, is love the real estate and the depth of being able to see a signal down to 4 hertz per pixel. Okay, think about that, 4 hertz per pixel. And then, but had a great VFO knob here. So it's a big deal. But well, let's go over to 20, where we got some activity, and I'm sure it'll be a zoo. So we flip over to 20. You'll see up here that the antenna's changing. This went red. The steppers got the new frequency. While this red, it's tuning. I have actually a software lockout written to Node Red saying, hey, if the stepper's busy, don't let the radio go into transmit. And we can do that within the within Flex Radio's API. For the programmers in here, if you're the least bit interested in writing interfaces, it's wide open. We publish how to do it. We want you to help. We want you to do it. Okay. So it's and let's, you know what, Rod, because it's probably busy, let's go to FT4. So I've just clicked and we've gone up to 14.080. The radio's changed frequency to 080. I don't use the wide graph because it just takes up resources for me. But we'll get rid of it and we'll just erase the screen. And the amplifier is off, so we won't use full gazillion watts, 749 that I'm legally allowed. But there's a YC7, and we'll just double click on him. And I'll increase my power, say, to a few more watts.
And Mike, we're seeing the remote desktop on the PC right now. Is that correct?
Correct. This is exactly how I operate.
So your interaction with the screen when you double clicked on the WSJTX window just looked like you're operating the software locally, but that is all remote.
That is all remote. And the nice thing is, George, if you wanted to, I could just give you the remote credentials and you could sit here and operate right there.
And the nice thing about that is I don't have to install any software or anything except the VNC client that's talking to your remote, right?
Correct.
Which VNC are you using?
I'm actually using any, because I'm local in the same LAN, I'm using a remote desktop right now. When I go home, I use AnyDesk because AnyDesk is a lot more efficient on sending data back and forth between the screens.
Oh, cool.
I can use, look at that, we got a QSO. And I can just hit OK. It's going to log it here. We'll see it's logged. And then I'll do the 3-finger salute, flip over to my logbook in HRD, and there he is. He got logged.
Right on. Okay, so just to clarify for folks, remembering that this is all happening on the PC that's in the boathouse. Okay, and we are simply remote from where Mike is right now, which is across the yard, but he might as well be sitting in his house in Toronto.
Yep, or Kitzbühel, Austria.
Yeah, and the other piece of flexibility that we mentioned there, just to be crystal clear, is while we're running Windows in the boathouse, we could be running Linux, we could be running Mac, we could be running anything that will do a remote connection into that Windows box. Good. Any questions? Sorry, go ahead.
Rod, one thing I want to add, what took me down this path was a long time ago is I only had 1 megabit of upstream data. So anything coming out had to come out. If there was a better way around it, and the screen updates for Windows desktop were far more efficient to send. And not only that, if you start sending the audio stream over the internet, it's in what we call a format called UDP, or the fire and forget missile packets. Not every one of those gets to the end. And that's critical for us on remote operation or running digital modes, because we want all that data. It's part of the information to decode our FD4, FT8, MSK 144, QC65, RTTY, whatever, PSK 31. And by running it all here, it's all local and my internet's a diet. So talk a bit more, and I'll show one more thing. Actually, I was going to bring up, I use a firewall called pfSense, and it allows me to see just how much bandwidth is in use by each device. So I can tune this, having some data. That's just, because I'm that guy. I like the facts.
Hey, Mike, back to the AnyDesk thing for a moment.
Yep.
I'm not familiar with that one, but there's a couple different commercial plans for that. Do you have a commercial plan, or is there a free one?
I'm just using the free one, and I haven't even exploited their EULA yet. But I also think I'm considering maybe buying it. The one thing it doesn't do on the free one is it doesn't do this nice, hey, just from any, log in and connect to that PC. I have to keep track of the numbers, the 9-digit numbers. So I have a Google Keep note where if I build a new machine with AnyDesk on it, that I can just pull in that 9-digit number and go. So, but I think, and I went to Teamviewer, by the way. I called them. I said, look, I work at home. I take care of a half a dozen friends. Teamviewer, do you not have a, helping friends version? I'll give you a couple $100 a year. No, weren't interested. I think AnyDesk is better. But the thing, and AnyDesk wouldn't let me run Skimmer. Skimmer was let me back that up. Teamviewer wouldn't let me run Skimmer reliably, CW Skimmer, because CW Skimmer is hugely screen intensive. And what Teamviewer was sending was the entire bitmap screen image 30 times a second. That's like a lot of data. AnyDesk will send just what changed.
Oh, that's much better, especially for these kind of applications.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I can even show you. We just kill this. And this is so we have a tool called Slice Master. It's a great amateur radio tool. So I flip the radio by the Maestro over to sideband, and I'm gonna bring up Skimmer. Okay, so never do this live.
First roll of demos.
Yeah, first roll demos. So go ahead, Rod, talk for a minute while I make sure something.
Yeah, while Mike is going through that, a reminder that in the upcoming weeks, we've got some really interesting people coming along. Howard's coming on from Long Island CW Club, is coming on May 22nd. On June 5th, Rio from the ARRL, who's one of the elected officials there, will be coming to join us and talk about futures in ham radio from the ARRL's perspective. And then I've got Tim Duffy on 10th of July. And if you've got if you'd like to present something on something that you're working on, whether it be something like noise elimination or whatever, just come talk to me, because we've got lots of slots coming up. But I do like having a couple of months of people along the way. Remember, we alternate between presentations like this one and roundtables. So next week is a roundtable week. Ready to go, Mike?
Nah, we'll just nuke it. One of the tricks with Slice Masters is it doesn't always kick things off every time when you change modes. A wonderful product, probably really nagging bug to try to find, but I'll spin it up one more time just to be sure. But so what Skimmer does is grab the IQ stream from the radio, which is 148 kilohertz wide. And then we get to see, here it comes. So this is CW Skimmer. We're down on, we'll dial down the band a bit, and you can actually get down here. Okay, past the guys doing digital stuff. I'm just dragging it down with my finger. And we'll just park right there. And Skimmer now is my CW decoder, and I can just turn on raw text. And I can't do this on any other remote desktop program. So I don't know how, Rod, it's working for you, but here it's flawless. What I'm going to do is just reduce that, because I don't really care, which should limit the frame rate updates. But
oh, it looks great. Looks great from this end.
And if you're if I want to go work with a guy, and by the way, so I have a whole thing on Skimmer. You can go read about it. No CPM. Thanks, guys. You can click on it and go to QSOs. It has a built-in cluster server, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, Skimmer is a pretty powerful tool for CW and RTTY contests. RTTY Skimmer exists too. So that's pretty much it.
So yes, looking in the chat, we are waiting for OS2 support. Ever hopeful.
Damn, you're good thing I didn't do it when I was at home, because I have an OS2 box sitting on my shelf, shrink wrapped.
Nothing like virtual
BIOS or death. BIOS or death.
There you go. Nice. Hey, so with that, we're going to wind up the demo portion. Any last questions before I wind it up?
Yeah,
Don't
I
be
do have
shy.
a quick. I have a question. So, Mike, when we see this system like this with, I mean, this is really fabulous. Thank you for taking the time to walk through this. This is just very interesting and also kind of inspiring about what we could do. Do you have a laundry list of the hardware and software that you would recommend for all these components in the shack? So, like, what are the major hardware brands and models and pieces of software and things like that that you've published anywhere?
Yeah, I have a flex-centric one. If you were to ask me and say, "Look, I'm starting fresh and where to start," I'm going to absolutely push the Flex product like any of the 6000 series, and it's not because I work there. It's 100% because it's the right tool for the job. Because it was designed from the ground up to do this, and the ports and all the stuff's wide open. But and SmartLink is built in, which is the remote part to allow you to connect to it. We didn't even go there. So say you're at, we used to say you're at Starbucks and you want to talk, connect to your radio. Before you'd have to have a VPN or you'd have to have a bit of networking background knowledge. Today's not true. It's not true with SmartLink because we've made it pretty user doable. You have to follow some instructions to set it up. But yeah, I do have a rough cook list that says, what if I take a radio? What gets Joe Blow on? So most people maybe have two antennas. So single radio, like a 6300 or a 6400, I got two antennas. Well, that's good. I can switch them remotely because it's built into the radio. It's got an antenna switch. I can connect to it remotely. And now I just need a couple of web switches to turn things on and off. But yes, I can give you some ideas. And I did find something in the US on Amazon to monitor my internet and power cycle the modem if the internet goes away for $60. I don't know anybody that's tried it. If it does what it says it does, so yeah, there's a pretty easy shopping list. So if you want to email me at Mike at send it to this VA3MW at portcredit.net.
Great, thank you.
And I'd be happy to follow up on that. I'll just send you my Flex laundry list. The beauty is though, you need to make it your own, right? You're going to build up and start going. And by the way, don't get too concerned about all the stuff here. This is like, a big long-term investment. You just want to first get it. Hey, I went away for the weekend and it worked. Okay.
Mike,
yeah.
Mike, John here. Now that radios are actually being designed for remote operation out of the box, what kind of uptake is there? Like maybe even just from Flex's point of view, but what proportion of users are actually, or at least using the remote from beyond their local area network?
4 years ago, we had this conversation in the office just this week. It was a bit of a fad, and you had the geeky 20%, latest greatest guys all having a blast. But it's now incredibly mainstream for a variety of reasons. Either you got maybe you're on the air, but all of a sudden you got to sell the house. You've got to move into maybe a condo or some version of long-term care or assisted living, but you still want to get on the air, and your buddy still got an active station. He goes, well, just use my station on a couple of nights a week. So this is happening all the time. Or 4 or 5 guys are getting together and going, they're getting older, they're 70. They can't maintain the antennas, they don't climb anymore, but they build a combined station and maybe somebody else runs it for them. They bring in some younger blood.
Yeah.
So yes, it's incredibly mainstream. So we were prioritizing some need to fix bugs the other day. I said, look, all this remote stuff, it's not at the bottom of the list anymore. It's part of the top of the list because, and we get a lot of heat over remote CW audio not working the way it should, and it doesn't. We know that, and now it's becoming more and more mainstream because, and that's I have to explain that. Don't run away with that in the wrong term without me explaining exactly what that's about. But
I understand. It's just I started getting into this remoting about 20 years ago, And I took a lot of stick because people said no one's ever going to use this stuff. And back then, when you were trying to do it with net meeting and stuff like that, you could sort of see why. But it's really exciting to see more and more radios coming out with the RJ45 on the back, and this whole stuff just becoming that much more easier to do. In fact, it's really sad because I just turned 70, so I guess I'm in your target market now.
I had a situation where about 20 years ago, 18 years ago, I was at a company that had an amateur radio club in the company. We were a cellular phone hardware manufacturer, and a lot of people in the company were hams. And we had a club station at the office. The company paid for the hardware and the radio and the antenna and everything. And then the company went out of business, and I was the president of the club at the company. And so the vice president said, "Mark, go ahead and take the hardware home." And this was in 2002. And my goal at the time was to make that hardware, put it up at my house and make it available over the internet to the club members. I'm like, this is still club hardware. And there just wasn't a solution that wasn't a Rube Goldbergian kind of system of run this and then get that up. And then you have to connect to this and then, sacrifice a chicken and pray to whatever deity is listening to you. And it just, there was no way of doing it. And so that's one of the main reasons why I want to buy a Flex, and it's in the budget for the next month or two, and I'm working on it. But my current club, a lot of people don't have an HF station at home. And so my goal is to put up, kind of make good on that original goal and put up the Flex at my house and make it available to people in the club.
So can I show you? There we go. That's my Flex running with.
Is that the mini Maestro, Peter?
Yeah,
no, there's no such thing.
But you've got to remember that when it comes to this high tech stuff, I'm an idiot, and I have my Flex running, and I have RF Skimmer running, WSJT running all through Slice Master. Thanks a lot to Mike Walker and some of the guys down at Flex, and it's incredible. It's the best. I mean, it's the best setup I've ever had. Simply, I'm not going to go wild on this, but just simply from the wiring interconnect of equipment. And I've said this before, back in the old days when I wanted to get on a new mode on a new contest, I'd start on Thursday with a hope that I'd be ready by 8 p.m. Friday night to run. Now I get to come downstairs 10 minutes before the contest, turn things on, and it actually works. That's just invaluable to me. Everything else, all the other technology, all the other wonders are all great. The ability for me as an idiot to come down and push the button and have it turn on is incredible. It really is.
We have a friend
amazing.
of ours that goes to Zone 2 for CQ Worldwide and CQ WPX, and he's a high-end SO2R operator, and he literally takes him a day and a half to set up his SO2 operation. So, and most of you know who he is. So I said, I packed him up a small Pelican case. I gave him a radio and an entire SO2R station ready to go. And he never gave me, he had it for months. He said he used it. He never said much other than, how much is all this? was the only reply I got back. And it was painful to read his trip reports when he came back because, because he'd say he'd spend like 18 hours setting up when he could have been focusing on antenna time. And then he'd start the contest exhausted on Friday night, right? And then he'd be upset that he actually had to sleep for 90 minutes and 48 hours.
Mm.
So,
hey, a good question here. 2 questions around the Maestro. So when I see your desk right there, I see you interacting with the PC in the boathouse. So you're remote controlling the PC to the boathouse, which is interacting with the Flex. And then there's the Maestro. And is that going to the PC or is that going directly to the Flex?
Directly to the Flex.
Right. So you've got 2 different devices controlling the Flex at the same time.
Right. If I was to reach up here and just pull the plug on the PC,
right,
which I won't do, and I could do that. You can see it says Win 10 power. I mean, just hit that little button and the Flex, the Maestro, I don't know how much of my window because it just keeps running.
Yep, I can see it.
Okay. And that's the advantage of, think of it. I can't even use this as a good analogy because some people don't understand. the radio, where we need to get to, whether it's us or whether it's ICOM, Kenwood, Yaesu, Elecraft, you need to get to the point where the radio is a server. Okay.
Yeah, that's
It's a
exactly what I
server.
was
It
trying to
really
get
is.
to. It's
It's a
exactly what I was
server.
getting get to, Mike. Is this is a
19 I didn't even-
conversation? This is a conversation you and I had years ago, right? About what should the RF deck look like compared to the compute devices, and that's just about perfect.
Rod, one more thing on that. In the Flex design, we actually digitized the entire HF spectrum from 30 kilohertz to 54 megahertz. So that whole spectrum is available to any user connected to the radio. Now, the radio only supports 2 users or 2 clients at the same time. They could be the same person or 2 different people in 2 different parts of the world. But yes, you could be listening to 6 meters while I'm listening to 80 meters. And we have to fight about antennas and stuff. But, you know, the core part allows that to happen. And and SDR, by the way, SDR is a technology. It's just a build technology. You know, your cell phone's an SDR. Now we've called it the wrong things as an SDR, you know, like the web SDRs and stuff, but it's just a technology. What's the big difference? Well, they only look like small little slivers of the radio spectrum. And then that sample rate's not that great either. We work at, you know, huge. And this allows us to have what we call multiplex with multiple users on the same radio. And that's only going to get better as there's more and more horsepower, you know, available.
And there's another question from Pat. Pat, do you want to call that or?
Oh, go ahead, Rod.
Okay. Pat was asking about how did you get the video from the Maestro to be seen on Zoom here? That's magic.
You can't. It's a magic trick. I mean, that's a magic trick.
Okay.
It's part of because I have a test piece of
Got it.
equipment.
Okay, good enough. I was surprised when I saw that.
I bet you were. The tablet in the Maestro has a very finite set of horsepower on it, and a Windows tablet in a device like this is not uncommon in any industry, from the aeronautical industry to the healthcare industry to manufacturing. Tablets with built-in Windows ME or embedded just make it very easy to develop with, and so that's why these features aren't actually built in, because there's always that fear of slowing down the Maestro's performance, and especially on SmartLink where the tablet handles the audio through it, that it you know, you don't want any more latent than it can be. So yeah, it's a little Windows tablet in there. Well, it's reasonably powerful 5 years ago, but on a big diet going, you know, you can't do it.
Yeah, honestly, I don't see a reason, an application where I'd want to do it. I was just surprised when you did it.
I bet you, yeah. I use it for screenshots and teaching and stuff, of course.
Okay. If there's no further questions, I'm going to wrap this up. We've gone just over an hour. I don't want to leave it too long. But Mike, thank you so much for volunteering to do this for us. And it was amazing. I think it's a really unique perspective, at least for me, from what I've seen. I've seen pieces of this demo, but I've never seen it end to end to end. So it's awesome. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's like the trip if you actually drove up here and we went for a walk. That's what we tried to do.
Exactly. I feel like I know the cottage. Okay, good stuff.